How's it going? Welcome back to Sunny Sheets. I'm Carson, and I'm back with another book chat. You know, it's funny, the first two book chats I did were over much more obscure, kind of lesser known, short little standalone stories. And now I'm here to talk about one of the most influential science fiction fantasy books probably ever written, Dune by Frank Herbert. Before I even talk about the book itself, I just have to say this edition I have of Dune, I think it's a Books A Million exclusive. This book is gorgeous. I just had to show this off. I think it's my favorite physical book I own. Not even related to the story, but just how beautiful it is. And I'm a sucker for beige, cream colored pages. I don't like when pages are bright white, and I don't know if this even shows on the camera, but yeah, just wanted to show it off. The physical book is beautiful. But let's talk about Dune. You know, it is one of the most influential SFF books ever written, but let's assume you don't know what Dune is. What is Dune about? Well, Dune is a book with very deep world building, very deep philosophy and religion, and lots of ideas to chew on. But at its core, it's a revenge story. The Atreides family, who is a powerful and honorable great house amongst this civilization called the Imperium, is taken down in a traitorous plot. And the prince of this family, his name's Paul Atreides, he wants revenge. And the whole book is essentially his crafting and his scheming and him working up towards getting that ultimate revenge. So the bulk of the story takes place on the most important planet in the Dune world, called Arrakis. Arrakis is dangerous, nearly inhospitable, extremely dry. But it's extremely crucial to the way that the whole Imperium functions because of the spice. The spice is a psychoactive drug that, for someone with strong mental capabilities, can sort of see through the future, and that sort of enables space travel because space travel is dangerous, and so gaining foresight allows navigators to navigate through space. And so all of the politics and the political power all sort of culminates to who owns the spice. As you can tell from just from the explanation of spice, like the whole imaginative world building of this book is truly incredible. Such an enriching fiction world that Frank Herbert has crafted. One thing that I loved about the way that this book is written is its third-person omnipotent narrator. You're not following a particular POV of a character per chapter. You follow POVs of groupings of people in different places, but within that setting or within that scene, you're getting the inner dialogue of all the characters. It's not just the inner dialogue of whatever POV you're following, it's of everyone in the room. And I really feel like that enriched the story a lot. You're given a lot more character, not being told by whoever you're following, but by everyone's internal dialogue, which I found very enriching. It was very interesting to read a book in that style. And one of the things that Dune is most known for, I believe, is the denseness of its philosophy and its world building. This book has layers. There are forces acting upon forces, and something that a lot of the characters say a lot in the book is a feint within a feint within a feint. You know, just moves upon moves being played upon one another, and there's never one clear victor. It is always a constant shift of political power, different factions, different organizations, and it was just really interesting to read. And within the dialogue and within the epigraphs that come before every paragraph, there's just so much wisdom and philosophy. Not even just for the sake of reading it, but genuinely stuff that can be internalized in your day-to-day life that I think is very helpful. That's pretty much all I feel like I can say without any sort of spoilers for Dune. This is easily top 5 books I've ever read. This was everything I wanted it to be, everything I've heard that it is. It absolutely lived up to its fame. I don't think there was anything that I disliked about the book whatsoever. Truly lived up to its fame. This was a 10 out of 10 read for me. I have just a couple of things I want to chat about the book. Couple of things in the story that made me happy or made me sad. One sad thing that sort of broke my heart was I really liked Thufir Hawat. I thought Thufir was a pretty interesting character. You know, he was Duke Leto's mentat, who was someone that sort of steered him in the right direction and was extremely loyal. And it was really sad to see him unable to shake his suspicion of Jessica being the one that was the traitor. And I feel like because of that, whenever he eventually gets captured and he's under Baron Harkonnen's control, it sort of seemed like he could never shake that feeling of treachery from Jessica, and he sort of succumbs to his position and just starts working for Baron Harkonnen and also scheming to put Fade Routha on the throne. And it was just sad to see him kind of just almost give up his loyalty to Duke Leto. That's how it seemed, that he sort of succumbed to his position and just started helping Baron Harkonnen. That was really sad. Another point of mine that I really enjoyed. It's been a while since I saw Dune Part 1, but if I recall, Duke Leto doesn't get that much characterization. I don't think. It was kind of just who he was, and he was the Duke, and he was Paul's dad, and then he's taken down a traitorous plot. I don't remember too much about him, but in the book, he is very characterized as someone who is very honorable and just sort of a very highly looked upon man. There's that scene in the ornithopter where they're flying over and they're witnessing people harvesting spice, and one of the lookers sort of fled away and they were in danger of being eaten by a sandworm, and he goes down on the land and he demands that all of the people be saved and brought onto his ship instead of caring about the spice. And it just sort of showed that he was very serious about people's lives, and he was someone that almost up until his end really tried to live to the highest of morals that he could. And I don't know, it was cool to see that characterization of him, and also to see the opposite in Paul. Paul's character sort of devolves as he becomes the Kwisatz Haderach and the Lisan al Gaib. There's a point, I think at the very end of the book, where after this war, they're sort of talking about some of the damages that I've done, and Paul says that, oh, it's nothing, that money can't buy more equipment. And I can't recall exactly, I think it was Gurney, and I remember him he thinks to himself, man, he thinks about the money and the equipment before the lives of the men that were lost, sort of counteracting his degrade in morals compared to his father, who was very first concerned with the lives of men. And I thought that was interesting. Another point about the book is that from the get-go, you are foreshadowed and basically told that Paul has this huge, and he calls it his terrible purpose. And he sees into the future really early on, the jihad that he commits and the soldiers flying his banner all across the empire. And just knowing that that happens, and that essentially that it can't be stopped, is sort of the vibe that you get from that, really adds tension. And his inner dialogue of, I must prevent this from happening, and then eventually he just says, this was inevitable. Like this is my purpose. And he sort of, towards the end of the book, falls into it. And also kind of sort of related to that is one thing that was really sad to see is Paul, at the very end of the book, he notes Stilgar and he says something like, how sad it is to see Stilgar go from a friend to a worshiper. How Paul went from a fellow friend of the Fremen to just someone who is a messiah, a prophet that is completely worshipped blindly by the primitive race of the Fremen. That was sad to see. And there's one bit of wisdom that particularly hits home that I think is really insightful for people in real life. There's a scene pretty early on in the book, I think when Duke Leto first meets Stilgar, and Stilgar spits on the ground. And all of the guards get up and everyone gets pissed. They take that as an immensely disrespectful gesture from Stilgar. And like in real life, like if you spit at someone, like that's a very derogatory thing to spit at someone. But in Fremen culture, that's a great honor. Their whole culture is built around water. So spitting to the Fremen is sort of, I'm giving up a bit of my water for you. Like that's a very honorable thing to do to someone in their culture. And Jessica, I don't think it was that particular scene. I think she says this later, but she says something like, great allowances should always be made for differences in customs and training. She's essentially saying that different cultures are gonna have different things that are viewed as positive or negative, but the intention of a person is really what matters. And to end my spoiler notes on a high note, and the way that the book ends, the last paragraph, I think is super sweet. So Paul, at the end of the book, he usurps the throne by marrying the emperor's daughter. And his actual Fremen lover, Chani, is not super stoked about it. Paul is giving all of the different Fremen and his people different positions of power. Stilgar is granted the governor of Arrakis, and Gurney is, I think, head of the Chom Company. He's delegating all these positions. And Chani sort of says, Paul, I beg of you, don't give me any positions. Like, I don't want any of this. Like, just don't. And she seems very resigned to what's happening. And Jessica, she reassures Chani. She says something like, you know, the Princess Arulin, she might be his wife in name, but she is not going to see an ounce of love. She basically says, oh, she's the wife just out of political necessary only. She says that history will see the princess as less than a concubine, but she will see you and I as Paul's true wives. And that's the way the book ends, basically. Jessica reaffirming to Chani that Paul truly does love her. Which, for a book that ends in kind of a darker tone of Paul usurping the throne and starting a religious jihad, it is nice to know that he does at least have true love for his Fremen wife, Chani. And I think at the end of book chats, when I'm done wrapping up the book, I would like to start showing you what I'm reading next, so that you maybe get a glimpse at what the next book chat's going to be, or if you're just curious what I'm reading next. My next book is Conqueror's Blood by Zamil Akhtar. This is the second book in the Gunmetal God series. It's a series that I want to finish, or at least get caught up to date. I think he's writing more books. So yeah, that's what I'm reading next. You know, something a little different that I see a lot of people do on BookTube that I thought would be fun to just kind of add to my book chats is updates about stuff that's not books, what shows and video games I'm watching. So for video game, right now, my main focus is Neo 2. I have been itching to sink my teeth into a video game again, not just, you know, every now and then playing Rocket League or playing a game of Fortnite. I wanted to sink my teeth back into a game, and I absolutely adored Elden Ring. I beat the base game and the DLC, and I was itching for a Souls-like experience again. So I started playing Neo 2 because I touched the first one a little bit, and I love the Japanese aesthetic. And I also thought the stance change feature was really cool in Neo, so I just decided to buy Neo 2, and I'm loving it so far. I'm getting used to the controls. X being the PlayStation X, being the roll instead of circle is a bit strange, but I'm getting used to it. And so this is my boy, this is my character right here. So yeah, I'm loving Neo 2. I just beat the first boss, Mezuki. So yeah, that's the video game I'm playing. Then for shows, I'm in the middle of watching 2 shows. So Paige and I together are watching True Detective Season 1. I've heard that this is one of the best seasons of television history with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. Their interplay so far is just incredible. And I love both of the actors. And Paige and I, we're loving it so much so far. And then I, by myself, like I have a solo show. I just finished Dune, so I'm watching Dune Prophecy on HBO. I don't know if that show is derived, because there's a book, I think, called The Sisterhood, Dune Sisterhood. It probably comes from that book, but I decided just to watch the show. I wanted something to watch solo, so that's the show I'm watching. And now to end the video properly, Going to be reading a book excerpt from my journal. His teeth sang in their individual sockets like tuning forks, each one pitch perfect and clear as ethanol. His bones, beneath the hazy envelope of flesh, were chromed and polished, the joints lubricated with a film of silicone. Sandstorms raged across the scoured floor of his skull, generating waves of high-thin static that broke behind his eyes, spheres of purest crystal, expanding. The experiences of a stem drug and neuromancer.